Well, after a pretty slow start, vaccines are starting to flow into this country as more get approved, but also as we source them more widely. Canada will be getting about 2 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine from India alone. Of course, India, a major producer not only of this vaccine, but also of vaccines globally, even before there was a pandemic. But with recent diplomatic tensions between Canada and India, there were questions about whether India would even be a supplier. So now we are getting those 2 million doses, but how sustainable is that? Let's bring in Ajay Bisaria. He's the High Commissioner of India to Canada, and he was at the forefront of negotiating this batch of supply to Canada. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's just talk about first the recent tensions that there appear to have been between Canada and India, and how exactly they got resolved.
Well, we had an excellent conversation between the two prime ministers. Prime Minister Trudeau on the 10th of February picked up the phone and talked to Prime Minister Modi and made a request for vaccines. And India was happy to readily agree. And tomorrow we will have in Toronto landing 500,000 doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine produced by the Serum Institute of India as part of, as you said, the $2 million doses contract. And we are delighted this is happening. We had a conversation with our Canadian friends continuously on a number of issues. And we are glad to see a great deal of understanding of the issues that India is dealing with.
I guess because you were so close to those negotiations, what was key to securing them?
Well, it went through several stages of negotiation. The first, of course, was the political decision, and this was the call that Prime Minister Trudeau made to Prime Minister Modi. He readily agreed, and simultaneously we had a conversation because this is a commercial contract between Verity Pharmaceuticals, a private company in Toronto, with the Serum Institute of India. And they put together this deal, and we are delighted to be able to facilitate it at the government level because, after all, India and Canada are strong strategic partners, and we have a great deal of economic engagement and a great deal going.
As you know, Canada lags major countries when it comes to the percent of population that has been vaccinated. A big part of that is our inability to secure that supply. Is there provisions is there a possibility that, those initial 2 million doses could be increased? Are those part of the discussions that you're having?
Certainly is a possibility because, as you know, India is the vaccine maker of the world. It used to be the pharmacy of the world, but it's also now the vaccine maker of the world. We have 62% of global capacity. We have 6 vaccines that are in various stages of development in India. Of course, AstraZeneca, produced by the Serum Institute, is right there. The Serum Institute is the largest vaccine maker in the world. So we have ongoing conversations. There's tremendous capacity. And going forward, certainly, there is room for doing more deals and getting more vaccines out there. India has already put out 40 million doses for about 40-odd country friends and neighbors. And this process, I'm sure, will continue.
It's interesting because so much of the supply, as you mentioned, is AstraZeneca based. I wonder if the ability to distribute and provide for the world is curbed by some recommendations out there that this is not an appropriate vaccine for those over 65.
Well, there is a great deal of science-based, evidence-based research that is going into these decisions. And you know that India is rolling out the largest vaccination drive in the world. That has AstraZeneca vaccines as a cornerstone. We also have an indigenous vaccine that's being rolled out, Bharat Biotech. So a great deal of this is science-based, evidence-based, and we're in new territory. We have the evidence still coming in, but we hope that these vaccines will be completely safe, and we are basing our decisions on the recommendations of experts.
How much of a breakthrough was that phone call between Trudeau and Modi in terms of putting the relations on really solid footing? And I ask that because, I'm just wondering how fragile it is in terms of our vulnerability to those vaccines being rescinded or not getting additional shipments. How would you describe the relationship now?
Well, I think it is a strong strategic partnership, not of recent vintage. Prime Minister Modi was here in 2015, and we've had a relationship based on a strong economic engagement. There is investment in India from Canada. That's the headline of the economic engagement. The portfolio investment in India has gone up from $5 billion to more than $50 billion now. So there will be issues that will be discussed candidly between the two sides, always, as they were. On the 10th of February, Prime Minister Trudeau commended India for the way it was holding dialogues with protesting farmers based on democratic principles. So I think these are two strong strategic partners, and there's no reason to worry about the flow, the global supply chains being respected when contracts are signed.
Can you give us some insight into domestically, when it comes to political situation in India, how is it viewed domestically for India to be such a top exporter of the COVID-19 vaccine when it still has so much of its own population to vaccinate against? And I asked that on the back of Joe Biden's press secretary yesterday basically saying flat out they're not going to be a provider to the U.S., to Canada and Mexico until they've got their population taken care of. India is obviously taking a very different approach. How does that sit domestically?
Well, India is strongly committed to vaccine internationalism. And I said we are conscious of the responsibility of being the largest vaccine maker in the world, and conscious of a very global responsibility, very clearly articulated that we need to be part of the global solution in this case. And there is simultaneously the largest vaccination drive in the world rolling out in India with a great deal of success. Only yesterday, it was opened up in the second phase to everyone above 60 and everyone over 45 with comorbidities. And it is rolling out with the help of app which is allowing everyone to register. So in India, the conversation accepts India's global responsibility. There is no vaccine nationalism in view. And in fact, Indians are quite proud of their international role in being a part of the healing hand in 2021.
You mentioned the Serum Institute, and it's a fascinating story on its own, just in terms of how it was able to be so far ahead when it comes to vaccine development, but vaccine production. For those who are not familiar, just give us a story of the early bets that the Serum Institute made when it came to the vaccine very early on in the pandemic.
Absolutely. The vaccine story and India's position as a vaccine powerhouse is not accidental. It hasn't come suddenly. India runs some of the biggest vaccination drives, even pre-COVID. There are 12 diseases for which every infant is immunized, and 27 million infants every year. So India has a huge ecosystem for vaccines in place, both in the public sector and private sector. And I think the Serum Institute has been a visionary story, because they recognize the need for global vaccines even before the COVID pandemic. And of course, during the pandemic, it gave them an opportunity to come across and establish their credentials and reputation as the largest global vaccine maker. So I think it's not an accident. This is something that is going on. India is the pharmacy of the world, but the profile that Serum Institute gets during this pandemic is very special.
All right, Ajay Basaria, High Commissioner of India to Canada.